And now, the general weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Friday, November 8th, 2024. And a quick check here of the sea ice. The ice continues to grow steadily with the colder temperatures now in place along the Beaufort and Chukchi Sea coastlines and also the Norton Sound coastline. We are going to see a little colder air coming in from the northeast and get into the northern central interior along the Alcan border later this weekend through early next week. So again, colder air in place means more ice growth ahead. In the meantime, though, we have weak low pressure late tonight, early Saturday morning, weakening here in the western Gulf. This is the next one. It'll deepen a little further as it passes just south of Kodiak Island by Saturday afternoon, 969 millibars. This low has a pretty good wind field, gale force wind field around it with some gust to storm force possible. There will be coastal rains at sea level there along Kodiak Island, but snow in the mountains, same thing along the Alaska Peninsula. So look for ahead of the system. Winds will be east, northeast, and then on the backside, winds will be out of the north and northwest. And by Sunday afternoon, the low begins to fill and head more southeastward through the through the North Pacific. But this front will push some gusty winds in the southern panhandle. It has some storm force gusts on Sunday, along with some areas of coastal sea level rain and snow as you get up in elevations and a little further north, especially maybe central northern parts of the panhandle. Looking at the marine forecast for Saturday, south to southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 3-4 feet, inner channels, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, but 6-7 feet here. Around Metlakatla there, Dixon Entrance. For areas off of Sitka, Craig, south winds 15 knots. They'll become more southeasterly, 20 knots outside of Yakutat Bay, 30 knots Cape Suckling, waves 11 to 12 feet there in the northeastern Gulf. And then for Sunday, look for north winds 25 knots, Lynn Canal, 6-foot waves, north winds 20 knots there around Petersburg and Stevens Passage, 5-foot waves. But southeast winds 30 knots because that front's going to be right in this area here. And strongest winds will be off of Sitka and Craig, 35 to 40 knot gales with gusts to 55 to 60 knot storm force winds in that area off of Craig, Prince of Wales Island, and there south of Sitka. As we get further north, northeast winds 15 knots out of Yakutat Bay, 30 knot north winds out of Cape Suckling with 14 to 15 foot waves that way. For Saturday, look for easterly winds 20 knots, 4-foot waves, Prince William Sound. Southeast to east winds 25 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance and along the Kenai Peninsula, waves 7 to as high as 9-10 feet there outside of Hinchinbrook. And then the lower portion of Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 to 30 knots with waves 8 to 9 feet, especially toward Kamishak Bay. On Sunday, with the low center south of here, northeast to north winds will be the rule. North winds, Prince William Sound, 20 knots, 3-foot waves. Along the outer coast, 35 to 40 knot gales, 14, 15-foot waves. Highest there, just northeast of Kodiak Island. And as we go down through lower and middle Cook Inlet, north winds, 35 knot gales, waves 9 to 11 feet. Saturday, we'll see 35 knot gales, 9-foot waves, Shelikof Strait. East side of Kodiak Island, 45 knot southeast gales with waves 10 to 15 feet. And then 40 knot winds east of Chiknik, 13-foot waves. Those winds easterly Bristol Bay will turn back toward the northeast and north, 35 knots there north of Cold Bay, waves as high as 10 to 11 feet there. And for Sunday, with the low circulation off this way, north-northwest winds will be the rule. Look for northerly gales 40 to 45 knots around and south of Kodiak Island on Sunday. Turning northwesterly 30 to 35 knots as we trail out down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, waves 7 to 8 feet here on the North Pacific side and 10 to 14 feet on the Bering side, especially north of Cold Bay. The Aleutians on Saturday will see 35 to 40 knot gales across the eastern Aleutians. Those are northwesterly gales. They will become southwest winds, 25 knots or so once you get west of Adak. And then on Sunday, still 35 knot northwesterly gales, far eastern Aleutians around Unalaska. Those winds will try to turn back more with an east-southeast component west of Nikolsky and all the way up past Adak and then back to the northwest, 20 to 25 knots between Kiska and Shemya. For The southwest coast and heading up toward Norton Sound, we're looking at northeast winds 30 knots out of Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay 20-knot northeast winds. Along Norton Sound and the lower Yukon coast, 15-knot northeasterly winds with waves 3 feet where there is open water. North winds 30 knots around the Pribilofs with waves 10 to 11 feet. On Sunday, north winds within Bristol Bay 25 knots, northwest winds 25 knots in Kuskokwim Bay, as well as out toward the Pribilofs. And then north winds there, Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon coast into Utolan Strait, north winds 10 to 15 knots, waves running 2 to 3 feet. South of the Bering Strait, northeast winds 10 knots off the Seward Peninsula, north side of St. Lawrence, 2 to 4 foot waves. Strongest winds, Chukchi Sea will be that area. North of Cape Lisburn, off of Point Lay, 30-knot easterly winds, waves as high as 6 to 7 feet. There could be some heavier freezing spray in that area where there is open water. Along the Beaufort Sea coast, east winds to 20 knots with waves 4 feet where there is open water and some potential for freezing spray. Same thing on Sunday. Look for easterly winds 20-25 knots along the Beaufort Sea coast. Kaktovik to Utqiagvik, waves 4 to 5 feet. Again, strongest winds between Wainwright and off of Point Lay out there in the Chukchi Sea, waves as high as 6 feet with some heavy freezing spray. And then as we drop down south, through the Bering Strait, look for east-northeast winds becoming northerly at 15 knots and waves along the west side of, say, Wales, off of Wales and north side of St. Lawrence on Sunday will generally be running 3 to 4 feet.